Good afternoon, and thank you for having me to discuss Women Firefighters Health and Wellbeing Survey. It was an international survey we completed in 2018, and some of the findings we looked at across all of those international jurisdictions, but also drilling down into individual areas to see where we can learn from each other, and also where some of the challenges are, and particularly the common challenges. Just a quick intro about me. I am an operational station officer with ACT Fire and Rescue, which is a sub-agency of the Emergency Services Agency, located in Canberra, Australia. If you look at the map down below, you'll see where we're located, which is about a 3-hour drive south of Sydney, about 8 hours north of Melbourne. We're an inland city where our temperature ranges from around sort of -5 in winter, up to about 40 in summer. So it's a fairly big range. I've got 15 years operational experience within that service, and my PhD was completed in 2015, particularly looking at heat stress reactions of urban firefighters within Australia within that setting. To some extent, I'm a heat stress physiologist, but I'm now currently seconded to the Emergency Services Agency as the Director of Health and Fitness. And my current role sees me developing a human performance platform across the 4 operational services, that being fire and rescue, an ambulance service, which unlike the US is not a standalone service, is not a part of the fire service, it's standalone, the rural fire service and the state emergency service. So the last two in particular are volunteer services. The survey we did, as said in 2018, was lucky to work with some great researchers, with Emily Watkins from the UK, Eric Mould from the Netherlands, and Sari Yankee from the US. And the survey we did, and the reason we did that was, firstly, we wanted to ask women firefighters what they actually need, which particularly in the Australian context is something fairly rare. We tend to do things to people rather than actually engage them. We wanted to ask women firefighters what the barriers were to success and longevity of their health, to understand the international landscape, to learn who might actually be doing better things than us in terms of how we can collaborate, and also to build enough data to make a plan. It's definitely a problem across the areas, particularly in Australia, where we have such small data sets and sample sizes, where we need to look globally to get that data set we need. The survey itself was conducted in early 2018. As you can see, it's 840 respondents from 14 countries, 255 from the UK, 320 from North America, 88 from Europe, and 177 from Australia and New Zealand, which we're going to classify. So for the purposes of this, we're classifying them into those 4 groups. But as you can see, the 14 subgroups that are there will inform what we're doing. So the first thing we wanted to do is we wanted to look at career longevity. One of the metrics in Australia in particular, and I'm not sure overseas at the moment, is how many women we can get through the front door. We're not really at the level of maturity yet where we want to start to work out how we keep them in the service and how we keep them through to retirement. So when we actually asked how confident these women were of being operational past 60 years, worldwide we only found that 16% of respondents were confident of meeting the job requirements. Within Australia, and this is the context that I can most comfortably talk about, our retirement age is 63, with a pension age that is starting to drift out to about 70. So of there, only 16% of respondents confident of meeting that is a big issue for us. 31% of those respondents basically said they thought they could do it, but they would struggle to achieve that. And 53% actually simply think they won't meet the standards that we set for them. The biggest issue they have identified particularly were meeting the fitness standards, a lack of strength, and also the physical demands of the job. Interestingly, out of this whole thing was that Australasian women were more likely than others to report that they are likely to survive to 60. What is probably interesting from there is that in Australia there is no mandatory fitness testing post-entry, and potentially that could have skewed our data in that the UK Fire Service and the Dutch Fire Service have mandatory testing, and they reported much higher levels of women not confident of meeting their mandatory, meeting that retirement age. So to some extent, maybe within the Australian and also the North American context, maybe it's a case of without a standard, they think they can survive, independent of what the actual job requirements might be. In terms of ageing firefighters, which was the next area we started to look at, what we wanted to do is we wanted to look at what status they were at so that we can start to inform our research and our interventions, particularly looking to try and increase that longevity. So as you can see there, 17% of our respondents were perimenopausal or menopausal, which was a pretty consistent response across the group. Of those reporting that they were, so of that 17%, 39% of those report that it impacts their working life. Particularly, they were looking and reporting things like hot flashes, fatigue, so in excess of normal fatigue, mood swings, heavy irregular bleeding, memory loss, weight gain, loss of concentration, insomnia, strength loss, and nausea. So depending upon the context and the setting, all of those things are significant issues in terms of their operational safety, but also how they then maintain, whether they just stay within the service. So these are areas we need to start to address and start to support them to work through so that they can maintain an operational performance. In terms of when we look at this, we now want to look at, okay, what support is actually needed for women's health. So in terms of the concerns of the non-menopausal firefighters, so our younger firefighters, and that's where the bulk of our firefighters would currently sit. 36% of those respondents were worried about how that would affect their future working life in the future. If you're looking at that, though, what we're looking at is we're looking at a really high number within the UK and Ireland, and to some extent that may be a concerted effort by the UK Fire Service to deliver this information, so they're maybe more informed, but the others are about a quarter. So whether that's a true reflection of are they worried or not is somewhat skewed by how much information they have and whether it's actually on their radar. When you look at across the reasons and their main concerns were around that menopausal and the aging, was simply 16% of that was knowledge about how it's going to affect them. They're worried about their mental health. So what are the impacts on mental health and surviving within the service? Temperature regulation was definitely a big one. How that will affect their fitness, how that will affect their strength. And to some extent, while it's only a small data set, their embarrassment around having to work within a male environment where those supports are not a common thing, and they're probably not on the radar given that most of our officers and our managers are men. The other concerns that were raised were cancers, fertility issues, return to work post-pregnancy. Yes, and within Australia, it's something very, very new in that we don't quite know how to actually manage our pregnant females, but also breastfeeding. And there is a culture of sexism underpinning that, which is something I'm sure you're all well aware of. In terms of support, and this is something that ties directly into my current role, is that when we're looking at supporting them, so we want to look at this globally, not just women as a subset, but we also want to look at all firefighters. And of those, 79% of them worldwide say they have access to an on-site gym. However, so that's our green bars on the graph. But when you look at the actual amount of programs that are provided, only 30% of them actually have programs. And the reasons they have there is there's not enough time. Gyms aren't fit for purpose. There's a level of self-consciousness or intimidation. These are male-dominated workplaces, and they're not comfortable with their body image or people watching them on the treadmills. And there's also a level of lack of interest, which to some extent is probably not a great excuse. So we need to be focusing on the areas we can, creating fit-for-purpose gyms, and also trying to work out ways that we can actually make exercising more comfortable and safer for them. In terms of like the protective equipment and their clothing, only 73% of those who have access to specific PPE will actually choose to wear it. So you can see there in Australasia, it's about 55% of females are aware there is areas, but when we look at something like North America, it's 25%, and Europe it's down to about 12%. But again, of those, only 73% who actually are available will actually wear it. And part of it's to do with the gloves are ill-fitting, the helmets are ill-fitting, tunics and pants, SCBA, boots. The men's gear is simply better. They have difficulty accessing it, and they're not aware that the gear actually existed in many cases, so they don't go seeking it out. So to conclude, some of these comments that came from them, the women who undertook the survey, give a little bit more broader perspective of what their concerns are and how we're doing there. So we're looking at things like the impact on fertility, the risk of cancer. So like every bit of research, it all is done on men. So why don't we have data on females? So we need to work in that space. Returning to work after pregnancy and impact on breastfeeding. Most of our female recruits will come into that age group when they are going to get pregnant. They are going to go through that childbirth process, which means we need to engage them early on and have proactive systems that support them while they're doing that, while also maintaining their careers. And also in the mental health and culture, we need to make these spaces safer for them to come to work. So where do we go from now? Basically, we need to develop and deliver specialised strength conditioning programs. The Army is particularly leading the way in this. Tactical strength, we need to understand what exactly does a firefighter need to do, and then as a subset within that population, what do female firefighters need to maintain strength and conditioning throughout their career. We need to ensure PPEs fit the purpose for all of our firefighters. So we need to buy gear, we need to procure gear that fits. We need to become more collaborative around women firefighters, given how small a population they are. Here in Australia, we're just too small a data set, so we need to be looking internationally all the time. And within the US, it's a much bigger population, but again, it's still a very small subset. We need to include women in all our research projects. We need to stop taking their data out. We need to educate all the firefighters about population-specific risks and pursue a proactive approach to the longevity of women as operational firefighters. So thank you for your time, and my contact details are there. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.